I couldn't wait to tell you about this remedy because it's a so interesting one. And why Camphora is so interesting is that we usually have this remedy connected with acute states only. Usually with cholera-like states because it's a remedy for collapses, sudden collapses. In this respect, it resembles Veratrum album. It's a close remedy to Veratrum album and it's very close to Cuprum metallicum because they both have tendencies for convulsions. So these remedies in the Hahnemann era and Kent's era were used in cholera epidemic, like Veratrum and Camphora and Cuprum were main three remedies used in the cholera epidemic. Now, my question is, how many of you have ever prescribed Camphora for a chronic case? Tell me. Have you ever used this remedy in chronic case? I thought so. I thought so. There are mostly two reasons why we don't think of this remedy. The first is they say it antidotes all homeopathic remedies, so our mind is kind of preoccupied to use this remedy, correct? We are, in the back of our head, we have a fear that if we give Camphora, it will antidote everything we have given already, right? It's not true. I mean, it will antidote remedies in its crude form. I mean, if you have Camphora in material doses, it's highly aromatic, so it can antidote a lot of it can antidote most homeopathic remedies in its crude form, but it doesn't apply for the potentized form. Okay. Now, so this is the first reason why we don't even think of, we are scared to even think of this remedy. Okay. Now, the second reason is that we have it usually connected to diseases or disease which has been extinct almost, right? Cholera. It's not present anymore in our countries, in Western Europe or in USA. It's not here. So we may easily overlook this remedy and say something like, oh, it's not important remedy anymore. But it's really important remedy because there are plenty of chronic situations in which you should definitely think of this remedy as the possibility. I give you a few examples, okay? And then we come back to impotency, but I will give you a few examples. This remedy is very... this remedy kind of mimics several polychrasts. It's very close to Calcara carbonica, basically. I don't mean in sexual diseases, but basically, generally speaking, Camphora is very close, as far as chronic picture is concerned, is very close to Calcara carbonica. You know why? The first thing is, it has a very similar thermoregulation problem. It gets overheated very quickly, and it gets cold very quickly. In acute states, in Camphora, especially in collapse states, you know that they are very cold. They are icy cold all over. The breath is cold, the nose is cold, the skin is cold, the feet are cold, the hands are icy cold, like corpse, right? But you give a cover, but once you put a cover over them, they immediately put it down. They throw it away. They don't like it. So in the stage they are very cold in acute stages, in acute states, especially in collapse-like states. They don't want to be covered, right? In chronic states, you will not see it so quick the overheating doesn't come so quickly, but it comes quite quickly, but not as quickly as in acute states. Well, in acute state, when they go to the fever, when they start sweating, right? They need to be covered. They want to stay covered. So you see some kind of paradoxes in regarding thermoregulation. When they are sweaty and have flashes of heat, they want to stay under the cover. But while they are hot, they are cold. They want to stay. They doesn't want to be covered. The question is it always like this precisely? The answer is no. The heat and coldness intermingles each other. It mix each other. There will be states that you will have a patient with very strong flashes of heat, and they want to stay covered. But once they are uncovered, they feel cold. You cover them again, and they want to be uncovered again. Then you have cases, and this is usually true in chronic cases. They are very, very sensitive to cold air, cold draft especially. So they want to stay in a warm room. They are icy cold, but they want to stay in a warm room, right? But in acute state, it can be complete opposite. So it's like the thermoregulation has gone haywire. It's completely destroyed, right? There is, on the physical level, there is usually this coldness, right? And this coldness is something which is caused by contraction of the little veins in hands and feet. It's like the contraction prevents the blood reaching the periphery to the full extent. So they feel usually the fingers and hands and feet icy cold, right? Now, why they are so close to calcara? Because they may behave in the similar. They may behave similarly as calcara carbonica, especially in chronic cases. They go to bed with the socks on because they feel the tremendous coldness on the feet. But once they get warm in the bed, which is usually quite quickly, but it depends, of course. But the idea is once they get warm, they had to put the socks off and uncover their feet, exactly as you see in calcara carbonica. They either feel too warm or too cold. It's very difficult for thermoregulation to stay in the balance. So they feel either cold, very cold, or very hot. They are very easily overheated. And they are very easily get cold, especially when exposed to the cold air. Now imagine a patient in your office having this coldness of feet and sleep in the socks, while after a while, when they get hot in the bed, they must put them off. Of course, you will think of calcarea carbonica. And now imagine another thing. This very same person will tell you they have anxiety attacks at night, and they have a fear of being alone at night, and they have a fear of dark. Now, who of you will think of camphora? Nobody, right? But these are keynotes of camphora. And that's why it's so close, in some cases, to calcara carbonica. Okay? It's also quite close to phosphorus. Because although they are very cold, they have a thirst for very cold drinks, as phosphorus does. And not only this, they have a fear of dark. And when they are alone in the dark, they have a great deal of imagination about specters and ghosts and all these things being in the dark. So this fear of being alone in the dark and these delusions in the dark, coupled with desire or thirst for very, very cold drinks, make you think of phosphorus. But still, it can be camphora. I'm talking about this remedy in general because I don't want you to connect this with impotency alone. I want you to understand this remedy, which is really interesting. There is another feature which is quite similar to Calcara carbonica, and it is confusion. These people can reach a state that they are confused. They cannot remember well, and they become confused. And confusion is something which is very famous in Calcara carbonica. And you know, they are scared about others not to recognize their confusion. In Camphora, you will find a lot of fears, fear of catastrophe, fear of nuclear war, fear of disasters. All these things you will find in Calcara carbonica too. What's the most important thing? What will make you think of this remedy? It's the intensity of the coldness. On the physical level, the intensity of the coldness, the ischemia, right? Now, the ischemia is not a local thing. You know, you have remedies having coldness somewhere, right? But here, it's a general state. It's general. It's not only general, it's concomitant here. No matter what they develop, whether acute or chronic problem, it is always accompanied by severe icy coldness. No matter what happens, they go to collapse and they are very cold, and the coldness is very prominent, very striking, right? They can go to convulsions. They can develop epileptic convulsions. They can develop tetanic convulsions. They can develop usually clonic convulsions, especially in the face. It's a very neglected remedy in epilepsy, as George says in his Materia Medica Viva. Together with convulsions, there will be coldness, not only during convulsions, but even in between convulsions, there will be coldness. Now you have confusion resembling Alzheimer's disease. When to think of camphora in Alzheimer's disease? If you have Alzheimer's disease and Raynaud phenomena, ischemia of the little veins, coldness of hands, you have Raynaud phenomena together with something else. It may be epilepsy, it may be Alzheimer, it may be collapse, it may be diarrhea, it may be vomiting, right? It doesn't matter. This ischemia is what modifies the picture. And one part of the body which can be affected by the ischemia is penis, right? So it is a remedy which can be thought of in cases of impotence, especially when the penis is very, very, very cold. But it will not be a local problem. I mean, you have cold penis in Agnus Castus too. You can have cold penis in Caladium. Because on the physical level, during erection there is no enough blood in the penis, right? From one reason or another. So the coldness in impotence is something quite common. But here in Camphora, you will not see and you will not have the coldness located only in the penis. You will have coldness, icy coldness, intense coldness in hands, in feet, of the whole body. You will see the coldness. Maybe not as intense as in acute state, but very intense, still very intense. And this is not usual coldness. The person feels cold, is aggravated by cold. Now they decide to go to warm room or go to the stove, and they are temporarily ameliorated by it. But once they are sitting too long close to the stove or close to the heater or something, they get overheated, and then suddenly they want windows open. Now they are overheated. Now they want to be in cold weather, in cold air. So you see opposite state running through the picture of this remedy. So this is very important remedy when you have. This is very important remedy to think of in people with Raynaud phenomena, Raynaud syndrome, ischemia of the hands and fingers. It doesn't have to be so extreme as Raynaud phenomena. It can be just icy coldness of hands without a real diagnosis of Raynaud phenomena. But the peripheries of the body are not properly, nourished by blood. There is contraction of the blood vessels on the peripheries. The nose is cold. The face is cold. The hands are cold. The feet are cold. The skin is cold on the surface, right? And they are very, very sensitive to cold. So, if they have epileptic fit, they feel very cold before it, and they usually feel very cold after it. And even when not having seizures, in between the seizures, they have very icy cold hands. They can have Raynaud syndrome. When they develop Alzheimer's disease with confusion and bad memory and everything, they will have Raynaud syndrome or very icy cold hands. When they develop gastroenteritis with vomiting and diarrhea, they will have extreme coldness with cold perspiration, cold nose, cold hands, cold feet, cold skin, cold breath. So the idea is, whatever they develop, no matter what the name of the disease is, it will be accompanied by this coldness. And you have to understand that the coldness is concomitant. It's exacerbated no matter what happens in any kind of problems, whether acute or chronic. They have a common cold. Yes, Camphora can be indicated as a common cold. Okay, they feel very cold. The skin is very sensitive, so it can resemble arnica. But the coldness is so strong, but more they are cold, the less they want to be covered. This is not the arnica, right? This is not the case in arnica. The coldness is so striking. The coldness will not be so striking in arnica. But if you only look at the sensitivity of skin, yes, you will think of arnica and causticum and everything, all these remedies. But once you understand the intensity of the coldness, then you have to think of camphor. How many times have you used it? I think about 10 to 12 people. So this is something which is really, really important. Now you can see how close this remedy can be with common remedies like phosphorus and calcarea carbonica. Now another remedy which is very close is lycopodium. Because they have a fear of dark. And George mentioned one of his Camphora cases, and it was a case of man. It's published in Materia Medica Viva, who couldn't go to the basement without his little daughter, who was about 6 or 7 years old, young girl, to be safe, to feel safe. This is very characteristic for lycopodium. And lycopodium also can have impotence. So you couple these two things together, the impotence and fear of dark, and the need to have even the child at a close at the hand. And of course, you will think of lycopodium. You will not think of camphora. But if you know camphora, you must think of camphora too. Especially if this very patient has a very icy cold hands. Camphora have an impotency during intercourse. This is in common with caladium. And the main thing is the coldness, icy coldness, Raynaud syndrome, the coldness in general, coldness in hands, coldness in feet, and very cold penis. So there is a physical problem with ischemia. Ischemia is the causation for the impotence to develop. The vessels don't open up. They are contracted. Okay, they are contracted. So blood cannot, the peripheral parts cannot be supplied by the blood. Of course, they are supplied in a way, but they cannot be supplied fully. So they are very cold. Not only subjectively, but objectively. You put your hand, open the camphora patient's hand, and you have a feeling as you touch the corpse, a dead person. There is no vital heat. In chronic state, you will mostly find this in peripheries. Fingers, hands, palms, feet, nose, right? Peripheries. The outermost parts of the body. Then, in these parts, in these regions, the coldness will be most striking. And penis is not the exception. It's periphery, right? So there will usually be impotence with cold penis, but the coldness will not be only in penis, it will be everywhere in all peripheries. And that is when you should think of camphora. It's very close to veratrum album, especially in acute states, not in sexual complaints, okay? In sexual complaints, it's close to hyoscyamus. Maybe, yes, we can say in sexual complaints it has some similarities with both hyoscyamus and veratrum, because these remedies, camphora and hyoscyamus and veratrum, they have very strong sexual drive. They have very strong sexual desire. But what's important is that, as I said, and it's written in Materia Medica Viva, it's not from my mind, is that the idea of opposites goes through the picture of this remedy. And it's not only related to thermoregulation. For instance, if you take sexuality and sexual organs in Camphora, they can develop a state of such a strong sexual excitement that it resembles mania or trance. It's very strong. But on the other hand, you can see the complete opposite in a different time, complete losing of sexual desire, complete losing. So you can have violent sexual desire or complete absence of sexual desire together with impotency. You can have impotency with or without sexual desire, both at the different times, right? They can talk, they can have obscene talk like Hyoscyamus, and they can have very strong sexuality as Veratrum and Hyoscyamus. And by the way, Hyoscyamus and Veratrum have very similar sexuality, because they usually have a very strong sexual imagination, Veratrum and Hyoscyamus. Okay? So this is that's why they are close regarding sexual drive to these remedies. Of course, there is a close resemblance between Veratrum album and Camphora in acute states, especially in collapse states, because the collapse is something which can also accompany different acute states. So you have to understand collapse like concomitant state. They have diarrhea, vomiting, and collapse. It doesn't have to be collapse in a way of losing consciousness completely. It can be collapse state in a way of sinking of strength very rapidly, very quickly. So usually they can tell you, I have a state when I lose my strength within few seconds and I have to go to sleep for a few hours. So this rapid sinking of strength is something which is very strong feature of both Camphora and Veratrum. They both have convulsions, but the tendency for convulsions is more pronounced in Camphora than in Veratrum. Veratrum is not so convulsive. It can have convulsions. It is important remedy in epilepsy, especially in children, but not only in children. But the tendency for convulsions in Veratrum is not so strong as in Camphora. Camphora is really spastic remedy. Now, what's the difference between Veratrum and Camphora? Because they both have collapse-like states and a sudden sinking of strength and cold perspiration on the forehead. One of the difference is the opposites in thermoregulation. Veratrum is just cold. It also has desire for cold drinks, but it doesn't have aversion to be covered when cold in acute states. It needs to be covered, and it stays under the cover, and it's better when wrapped warmly, which is not the case in Camphora in most cases. I would not take it as a contraindication if Camphora would be very clear or will be very clear in other aspects, but especially in acute cases, this is the difference between Camphora and Veratrum. And the next difference in acute states, collapse-like states, gastroenteritis, is that the discharges in general in Veratrum are very copious, big amount of it. Okay, a lot of diarrhea, a lot of vomiting. In Camphora, usually you see not so much copious discharges. So discharges in Camphora are not copious. But when they are suppressed, for instance, imagine you have a child with gastroenteritis, so there is vomiting and diarrhea. It doesn't have to be very strong. I mean, they don't have so much diarrhea that you are scared of dehydration. But anyway, there is diarrhea, there is vomiting. And let's say you give something to suppress diarrhea and suppress vomiting in a child. Okay, you give some medication. What's very important in Camphora is that there is immediate effect when suppress any kind of discharges. And the effect is that they go to collapse state, the sudden sinking of strength, the coldness overall in peripheries, and sometimes convulsions. So definitely in Camphora, the suppression of discharges and the suppression of eruptions can lead to deeper problems. You definitely need to think of Camphora in cases when you have a patient with a rash from the exposure to the sun. Skin rash from the sun. It's a major remedy. Especially if you have this coldness, right? You have a sun rash and you expect the skin to be hot, but it's cold, like ice, right? So it doesn't have to be, it's complete opposite of belladonna, which can also develop skin rash after exposure to the sun. But this is complete different story because this is here you have the coldness. And sinking and rapid sinking of strength and coldness and cold perspiration and weakness. And this thermoregulation which has gone haywire completely. They feel cold, they want to be uncovered when they feel, when they have fever with sweating, they want to stay under the cover. Dana, so in Camphora, collapse is not due to amount of discharges, but to generalized ischemia. No. Collapse mostly is, it's not from one reason, right? It can be collapse due to epilepsy. It can be collapse due to low blood pressure. Because you can have a person with low blood pressure and coldness of hands, which is the main symptom of low blood pressure. And in some people, it can go to extreme, so they have a real Raynaud phenomena, and you can have collapse due to ischemia, or due to shortage of the supplying of the brain with the oxygen through the blood. So you can have the shortage of this supply, and then you can go to collapse. Yes, it's one of the reasons. Another reason why they can go to collapse is the suppression of eruptions or suppression of discharges. So you have to take both. It's not one or the other. The both can be causative for collapse to develop. Can you differentiate it with Carbo vegetabilis in terms of coldness? Yes. In Carbo vegetabilis, the coldness is not so strong. It's not so intense. You have collapse in Carbo. You have the cold perspiration, but the main thing in Carbo is the air hunger for cold air. It doesn't have to do anything with thermoregulation in Carbo vegetabilis. It has to do something with the feeling they don't have enough oxygen, right? That's why collapse-like states or collapse states, real collapse states in Carbo vegetabilis usually are the results of acute affecting the lungs. Imagine you have a person with severe bronchitis. And Carbo vegetabilis constitution is very sensitive to lack of oxygen. So what other people can take normally, they have a dyspnea for a while, and then it gets better, and they recover fully. In Carbo Vegetabilis, this is the causation, this is the trigger, because in Carbo Vegetabilis, you have a person who is very sensitive to any shortage in oxygen supply. So they have bronchitis and they have dyspnea for 1 day or 2 days, and it doesn't have to be a strong one. It's just a little bit of dyspnea, but this little bit is enough for them to develop consequences, right? So the main differentiation between Camphora and Carbo is that the most striking in Carbo Vegetabilis will be air hunger. They will tell you to use the fan and to fan the air into their faces, because there is threatening. There is a weakness of lungs in collapse states. It's the usual causation for collapse states is weakness of the lungs, which can be there due to pneumonia. That's why Carbo Vegetabilis is one of those remedies being indicated in last stages of pneumonia, when there is a threatening collapse of lungs, when there is no enough power in the lungs, right? So you have to force the air into their faces, because the lungs are not strong enough to take the breath spontaneously. You have to push the air into their faces. This is not at all in Camphora, right? The most prominent will be air hunger in Carbo Vegetabilis, while in Camphora the most prominent will be the coldness. Another part is that if it's acute state and if it's acute collapse state, all these charges stops immediately after the collapse. So sometimes it can be that you suppress these charges first and then it leads to collapse to develop. And the other scenario is they will develop collapse by themselves, but once they are in the collapse, there is no more power for these charges to keep going. So these charges stop just when the collapse appears. Why caladium is not in the upper rubric? I don't know. I don't know why it's not there. It should be there. So it's the mistake of the repertory. So that's just the reason why you need to know Materia Medica very well, because it's not perfect, okay? Repertory is not perfect. Maybe there is another rubric with very similar meaning where you will find caladium, but this is maybe a rubric with from the other author, which or who did not record it, or didn't record the caladium into this rubric. There are many rubrics with a similar meaning from different authors. That's why it's synthetic it's called synthetic repertory. Synthetic means from different people, right? Different authors. It has been, all these authors have been synthesized in this repertory. So you will have maybe 2 to 4 rubrics for a lot of symptoms with similar meaning, but and some remedies in these rubrics will go through all these rubrics, but there will be differences. So just don't believe repertory everything. Materia Medica should be your main source of information as far as remedies are concerned. Anyway, Camphora is here, and Raynaud disease. Camphora is here. It's added. It's Invitulcas compass is there in second degree. Invitulcas compass also Calcara carbonica is there in second degree, but for Calcara carbonica is not so strong, right? So usually Camphora is the most important remedy in this rubric, much more important than Arsenicum album. Okay. In any case, when there is a Raynaud phenomena, you have to think of Camphora.